Hello, Assalamualaikum, and very good morning to everyone. First of all, I would like to say big thank you to Jason for joining us today and giving the training for today. And other than that, I would like to thank everyone, to all our participants and audiences for joining us today. We hope that today is a good day for you, and we really hope that this event will be beneficial not just to you but also to your organization and to your business. So about today's events, we're going to talk about how to build a prototype for your startup without a coding. And a few takeaway from this event is what is no code and how it can benefit for your startup. Second, how to build digital product as a non-technical individual. And lastly, examples of no-code tools that can help you build your prototype fast. And here we have Jason as our speaker for today. And a little bit of biography for Jason is Jason Chiu is a serial entrepreneur and is currently running Omni, a data analytics company that he founded back in 2019, currently based in Kuala Lumpur with extensive experience in managing digital transformation for SME and corporate engagement. He is actively helping businesses scale fast in today's digital world with background in software development and also passionate about building great digital products and currently championing the no-code movement in Malaysia. And with that being said, and I would like to invite our speaker today, Jason, to start the training session. Thank you, everyone. Jason, to you.
Thanks, Ashraf. Thanks for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. I'm gonna start sharing my screen and we can get started. Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Awesome. All right, let's get this started. All right, so again, good morning, everyone. I know that it's very early, so thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. So for today's workshop, we are going to talk about how to build a no-code prototype for your startup. And just to do a real quick recap about myself, right? So my name is Jason. I am actually a software developer by trade, and currently my day job is running a company, a startup called HeyOmni, right? So HeyOmni is a data analytics company. And on top of that, I founded Codeless in a way to champion the no-code movement in Malaysia. So for Codeless, it's actually a play of words, right? So Codeless pretty much means no code. And it also means code less, right? Meaning that you don't want to code so much in a sense that to deliver products. So at Codeless, essentially, it is a resource hub. If you want to learn about no code, you want to know about no code products, you can come to Codeless. We give you all the tips and tricks, and essentially we run academies, and it's also an agency. So if you need help building any kind of digital products, we can also help you at Codeless. So just to go through today's agenda, we are going to be talking about what is no code and what is also the codeless movement, and essentially how you can kind of benefit from this movement to build digital products, especially if you're a non-technical individual. So today's session is especially targeted for non-technical people, but that doesn't mean that technical people in the audience cannot also use some of the benefits of no code to help them ship products faster, right? So on top of all that, today's session, I want it to be as interactive as possible. So we will actually be doing a live build, meaning that everyone in the audience today, we are going to be co-founding a startup together by the end of this session. And obviously, we will have pit stops, and also at the end of it, we will also take some Q&A. So just to start things off, we want it to be very interactive again, as I mentioned. So you can kind of have your phone handy today, and if you can go ahead and scan the QR code on the left side, all right? And just kind of get a feel of who you are. There are quite a bit of people in the audience today. So if you can go ahead and scan the QR code and just to interact with me, right? So that I can kind of know who is in the audience. If you're a student, you can select anything that applies to you. If you're a student, you're a startup founder, aspiring founder, technical, non-technical, please let me know, right? So that I can kind of tailor this session for you. So yeah, as you can see, there are some responses coming in. A lot of people are aspiring founders, non-technical. All right, we'll just let this run for another minute and then we'll just move on. So it's great. I can see that there's a lot of aspiring founders that are non-technical. So this workshop will benefit you, right? So there are currently some startup founders in the audience as well. So today you can kind of get a feel of how you can use these tools to not even just build a product from scratch. You can kind of build certain parts of your business and launch this very quickly and at a very cost-effective way as well as a startup founder. All right, thank you guys so much for interacting with me. I'll move on. So I'll jump right into the question, right? So what is no code? So no code is exactly how it sounds like, which means no coding. But in a way, to summarize it to 2 words, no code is visual programming, right? So what does that mean? Is essentially you are coding with your eyes and you are building everything through a graphical user interface, which we'll get into it in a bit. And this concept is actually ever evolving. It's not a new concept per se, but recently, in the recent years, more and more products in the market, more and more software in the market is being developed and shipped out to the public. So it's getting a lot more attention in the recent years, right? So we want to go through what I mean by a graphical user interface. All right, so I will try to keep it as non-technical as possible, but as a non-technical founder, as a startup founder myself, it's good to be able to understand what a developer, typically uses and things like, right? So for no code, mainly you're interacting with a GUI or graphical user interface, meaning that you, as you can see over here as an example, you are basically dragging building blocks on a software, right, to make up your web page, and you're able to edit certain content, put images and link to certain parts of pages, and you'll make up your app or website, right? So in a way, you're kind of designing rather than coding your application. So this concept is not new, as many of you guys are pretty familiar, I'm sure, with WordPress. So WordPress has been around for the longest time, and even up till today, WordPress actually powers 40% of the websites in the world, right? So this concept started with something called what you see is what you get. So this is very impactful in a way that, as you can see over here, anything that you edit is changed live, right? So it's impactful because it allows you to learn faster, right? And understand how software works, because everything that you change at this very same minute gets applied to the end product itself. So you're able to learn very quickly, and that is all no code is about, right? So obviously no code has evolved. There's a lot more things that has changed throughout the 20, 30 years, which we'll be able to explore. So essentially, all for this slide is that we are saying that there's only 1% of the world that knows how to code. So as we are shifting towards the tech world, the world definitely needs more programmers, right? So for this webinar and this workshop, what we are trying to say is that you can also be a programmer and a software developer without needing to know how to code, right? And how do you do that is by first understanding what is programming and coding, right? So for a non-technical person, programming and coding might sound like it's the same thing, but actually it's 2 very different things, right? So for me to break it down very simply, and the easiest example that I can think of is that, take for example, smartwatches, right? So smartwatches are available today, and a lot of people have smartwatches, and you are programming something on your smartwatch, right? So be it is as simple as setting an alarm to wake you up today at 10 a.m. to sit in this workshop. You are essentially programming your watch and telling your watch to wake you up at 10 a.m. without coding, right? So whenever you click those buttons or you interact with your smartwatch interface, it's actually on the back end itself. By clicking a few buttons, you are executing a few lines of codes that actually tells what this application or what this smartwatch is supposed to do. So you are programming it to do something without having the need to code, right? So in a way, to be a programmer today, you don't need to spend 4 years taking a computer science degree, for example, right? You can kind of use this as a shortcut. So in terms of coding, what coding is that you are learning languages, kind of like you're learning English, you're learning Malay, and you're trying to apply these languages into programming, right? So with no code, you're essentially taking a shortcut without having to go through 4 years of CS degree, and you're still able to deliver software and ship products. So that is programming versus coding. So now we move on to the codeless movement, right? We've been talking about the codeless movement and this and that, right? So today we are making a very big claim. We are saying that anyone can be a software developer, be it a non-coding software developer, right? So the idea of the codeless movement is that we want to democratize the use of tech. So as I mentioned before, only 1% of the world knows how to code, but that doesn't mean that tech jobs are just limited to coders and programmers, right? It actually allows you to, once you understand how an app works or how programming works, it actually allows you to transition into tech jobs easier, regardless of your background. And this codeless movement has been picking up because, especially in this day and age, especially during this pandemic even, right? It's the age of what we call the makers and creators, right? So anyone today out there that especially, like we can't go out, we can't meet people, we can't do business outside, you're doing everything online, right? So you're essentially creating and making, even if it's a simple, setting up a page on Facebook or, Instagram, setting up a very simple website. So this promotes digital literacy, and it's an on-demand skill right now that is very essential in the world right now, that no code can actually help you transition to that easier, right? So no code is pretty much about understanding how software works, and you're putting parts of softwares together to make up your end product, be it depending on how complex you want it to be, right? So if it's a very complex application or service that you're trying to build, there's definitely a tool or multiple tools out there that you can put together and kind of deliver it to the public. So today's focus is on startups, and generally people that, especially people in the audience, I can see today that they are all aspiring founders, right? Many of you guys are aspiring founders. So the question, I guess, would be, what's stopping you from starting up, right? So you can leave the questions, you can leave any questions or comments below. We'll get to it once we get to the pit stop. But ideally, as a startup founder, like to take that plunge, right, that jump to start your own startup, you typically have this question like, what is really stopping me to take the first step, right? So these are some of the common hurdles and some of the problems that maybe people might face, especially my peers, right? So typically, you might have a great idea out of the blue, and you feel like it's going to be executable. You want to make a business out of it, right? So when you want to start a startup, then you think of, if I'm not technical, I have to go out and look for a technical co-founder, right? So that is commonly the first hurdle of starting a startup, which is you don't find a tech co-founder. You can't find a tech co-founder. So the next step, what they would do is that they would be essentially outsourcing this, right? So there's a lot of few cases out there in a sense that they outsource their development or the app, and they get a very bad experience in a sense that, because you are the founder, right? So you have your vision or your idea, but if you can't communicate it correctly, let's say the agency might misinterpret it, and the end product is something that you don't want, right? And you can't, and a lot of these founders get frustrated. And it's also very expensive, right? Typically, building an app today, be it even if it's just a web application or native application, it will cost you up to like 50, 60,000 ringgit. And a lot of these founders, they would spend that kind of money and find out that, okay, this is not the product that I actually envision it to be. And it's also very time consuming and frustrating, right? Because you're going through different agencies, you're trying to review it and all that. And obviously, last but not all is that I don't want to quit my job, right? So when I start a startup, people would think that, I need to spend a lot of time building a very simple prototype or MVP, outsourcing it to people, this and that, just to start my startup, right? So that is usually the case, but with no code, we are able to actually counter that. And in a way, we're trying to say is that even without a tech co-founder, you can be your own tech co-founder, at least at the beginning, up until later on, like you can find a tech person that really believes in your idea as well. And especially if you have a prototype to prove it, they're able to join your team, right? So you know exactly kind of what you need to get things going. And it's very budget friendly. You're able to launch very quickly, typically developing an app, let's say a very simple app, 4 to 6 months, right? But with no code, can comfortably tell you that once you have the experience, you can launch anything, pretty much 90% of the product in the market in less than 2 months, for example, right? And ultimately, with all this time and money saved, you have more time to do what is most important for your startup, which is to actually scale your startup, right? Because to start a startup is not just about building the product, for example, right? You're not gonna, starting a startup doesn't mean build a product and that's it, right? You actually need to do the marketing and actually doing the actual selling of your product. And with no code, essentially, you are able to have more time to do what matters for your startup. So what can I build with no code, right? Today, we're gonna show you a few examples before we actually jump into building an actual no code product with you guys. For startups, typically what you want to build and what no code excels at building is building a prototype, right? Or rather something called the MVP. So the MVP means a minimum viable product, right? It's the most basic version of your product, of your idea that you can already start putting out in a market. And why this is important, because typically when you have a great idea, you will try to communicate this idea, right? So be it talking to your friends, your family, or your mom and dad, for example, right? So without a proper prototype, this translation or like when you try to disclose your app to them, it might be lost. But with a very simple prototype, you can kind of realize and start communicating your ideas more effectively. And most importantly, for any startup out there, is the word validate, right? So a lot of us startup founders, right? I'm guilty myself, right? We might think that, all right, this idea is great. I've built a great product and everybody wants it, up until you actually put it on the market and then you realize that, oh shit, like it's something that people don't actually really want, right? So you don't want to be spending 50,000 ringgit to build a product and put it on the market, and then once you validate it, it's something that people don't want. So with no code, it's as little as, let's say, 100 ringgit a month, right? You are able to already start building a prototype and start shipping it out to the market. Most importantly, you are able to convince others and also convince yourself, right? So most importantly as a startup founder is that you are able to convince yourself, right, to take that first step, right? That is the most important thing, in the sense that you want to have a product that you really believe in, you've built it yourself, you want to validate it, and you're able to jump immediately into becoming a startup founder, right? And again, just to recap, no code is able to build 90% of the products that you see in the market, right? Not all of it, but at least 90% of the products. So I want to show you guys a little bit in terms of some examples that I've built using no code, right? So over here we have an application. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with the white flag movement in Malaysia, the Bendera Putih. So during that time, I've come up with this application called Feed Malaysia. It is working with a non-profit called Malaysian Road Runners, right? So this entire application is built completely using no code. Essentially, the database is as simple as using a Google Sheet, all right? And the payment gateway is using Stripe or PayPal, maybe you guys are familiar with. So very simple, integrate these few things together and you're able to make an app. So over here, I have a QR code. If you want to check that app out, you can use your phone to scan it, something very interactive, right? So you can scan it and have a little play around with it and see what are the capabilities of no code, right? And over here, I even added that actually the logo itself it's not even designed by me, right? It's literally designed by an AI. Just a few buttons and I can basically extract a logo to use in my application, which we will be using later on when we found our startup together. Here's another example. So no code is not just building just mobile apps or web apps, right? So on top of here, no code can build pretty much any tech product in the sense that for this particular product is called A New Malaysia. So I built the no code website, in a sense, a landing page, and there's also an app to kind of track the My Digital Blueprint. So again, completely built and managed. Even the team uses Google Sheets, as simple as that, to manage the database, right? The landing page is built using a very simple landing page tool. You can also check that out by scanning the QR code, and you'll be able to see the website and also the mobile app itself, right? So obviously, the big question is, no-code startups, can they actually raise money, right? How far can they go rather than just being a prototype? So the best example here would be some success stories. So there are many startups out there that started with no code. In fact, my current startup, Hey Omni, we started with no code, right? So there are a lot of startups out there that have successfully shipped their first product using no code, and later on they started to build more features. And once you get more traction and more money, you can then think of getting a tech co-founder or hiring a developer team to actually build actual applications that are more sophisticated that you want. So over here, I want to highlight a startup called Coins, right? So Coins, their founders started off using a no-code platform called Bubble. Over here, you can see their applications. So what their application does is that they help people through financial coaching and enables automatic payments, right? So the concept is quite simple in the sense that every time you make a purchase, some part of it goes back to paying your debt. So this startup is completely built on no code at the beginning, and they even got funding from it, meaning that the VCs have paid attention to them and actually give them money, right? Because again, a product, doesn't matter how you build it, a product is a product, right? That once you have demand for it, right, and once you get the traction for it, it is validated. It's as simple as that. So you can also check them out at coins.io, just to name a few startups, right? So this is one of the best example of a successful startup that has raised money. So I've been talking about the beauty of no code. Obviously, there are some limitations, right? So I'm just going to address it off the bat. So again, 90% of the products in the market that you can think of can be built with no code. There's the remaining 10%, right? So what are the remaining 10%? So it really depends on your ideas, right? And typically what the main limitation for no code tools is that they have very rigid templates with limited customization. So if this no code tool is to manage your database, you can't use it to build a web app, for example, right? And it really depends on the features that they have as well, right? And it can also get quite expensive as you scale. So to start off with a prototype, let's say you have 100 users, it's going to cost you like maybe $10 per month, right? But when you get to, let's say 100,000 users, that costing will go up. It will go up to, let's say, maybe like $100 to $1,000, right? But this is a good problem to have, because assuming that you already have 100,000 users or customers, you would already have a lot of, well, at least you have some of the budget to actually think of, do I still want to use this platform? Do I want to scale to another platform? Or actually at the same time, while using the no-code tool, you can already start to kind of allocate some part of your budget to hiring an actual developer team, right? So that is the limitations of no-code. It can be countered in a sense that all this customization can be done later on. So again, no-code is mainly for a minimum viable product, depending on your idea, right? So ideas are different and spreads all out in different founders, right? So now we want to talk about how hard is it to learn no-code. Again, it depends on what you want to build and how much time you can commit, right? So in terms of no-code tools, is that you will need to spend time to learn how to use that particular tool. And it really depends on how much time you can commit, right? So like learning anything and everything in life is that the ability to teach yourself is very important. And right now in the digital age, there is so many resources out there and so many tutorials out there that will teach you literally anything that you want to learn, right? So again, it is not hard to learn no code, right? Depends on your commitment, and in a sense that because there are so many tools out there in the market right now. It's actually these tools are software companies, right? And they are competing with each another. And because of that, it's good for us as a consumer because they want to keep making easier to use platforms, right? Easier to use tools. And as you can see, progressively, all these tools are getting easier and easier to use. All this software are getting easier and easier to use to enable non-technical people to pick it up, as fast as day one, right? And in the terms that since we keep talking about tool, you can kind of see it kind of evolves the same way as, let's say, having a very simple screwdriver, right? So with technology, obviously right now you have, like machine powered screwdrivers now that you don't even need to use your hand to actually screw it, right? You can use a machine to just screw it, right? So how do I get started? This is especially for non-technical founders, and we have gotten to the point that we want to elaborate in terms of which ones are your priorities, right? So first, as a startup founder, you will kind of, especially a non-technical founder, you will need to understand the components that actually make up an application, right? An app. And you need to start small by understanding these parts, and you can use these tools to make together the so-called framework that you have in your mind, right? So over here, we have the components of an app. Typically, this is what make up an application, right? You have the front end, which is where your users will come to. When they land on your website, your landing page, they will see your front end, whatever information that you want to display to them. And moving on from the front end, you will have the input and request, right? So what do we mean by input in a sense that it can be as simple as just a form on your website. And once the users put any kind of input, any kind of data that you want to collect, this data is then stored on your backend, right? And once all this information is collected, you will have the logic and automation to kind of put all of this together and connect the components together to make up your app, right? So I'll show you guys an example, right? So let's say we are visiting a e-commerce site, and you go to ecommerce.com. There's their front end. You'll be able to see their website. You can see all the items that they're selling right now, and you're able to browse for the items. Once you select the items that you want to buy and make an order, that is considered an input, right? So at the same time, you're requesting the server to kind of pass you this information back that you want to, select this item, what color that you want, and you make an order and you kind of input it. And once you have done this, your order information is stored on the server's backend or this website's backend, and it's pending the review of the business owner or the admin, right? So how logic and automation comes in is that how you design this so-called user journey, right? And logic and automation is very simple. Once you make this order information, obviously you're getting a confirmation email of your order. At the same time, the admin gets a new order confirmation. And a little bit more sophisticated in terms of automation is the inventory quantity actually goes down, right? So when you buy, let's say the website has 10 plates available and you make a purchase, now there's only 9 plates available. So this is completely automated, right? The admin is not gonna, like when you make a purchase at 3 a.m., the admin is not gonna sit up at 3 a.m. to send you a confirmation email, right? Everything is automated, and this is how logic and automation will make up your entire application, right? So the best part about once you have understand these components of an application, the good news is that every part of this component can actually be replaced and built by a no-code tool, right? So take, for example, you're like in a workshop right now, you're picking, tools that will do the job, right? So essentially, with no-code, you're just picking up different softwares or different tools and putting them together to make up your app. based on that framework that I mentioned before, right? So there's absolutely no coding needed. All you need to do is to be able to understand what works and what will make up your app and use the tool to execute that. So again, no-code tools, kind of like a buzzword that we keep talking about, no-code tools, right? Essentially what no-code tool is, it is just a software development platform, right? It's just a software, just a website or a web app that someone has developed that allow you to build on top of it, right? So the most common no-code tool that has been around for the longest time, again, is, let's say, things like WordPress, Wix, or even way back, there's something called Macromedia, Dreamweaver, right? So all of these no-code tools are very visual. They allow you to very simply drag and drop building blocks, edit certain parts of the content, add some visuals to it, and you can make a very nice website and landing page for yourself, right? But in a sense that what has evolved here is that no-code tools are not just landing pages anymore, right? You don't just build landing pages. In fact, no-code tools can allow you to build things like inventory systems, full-fledged marketplaces, CRMs, even AI and blockchain as well, right? So I'm sure that, you know, like with the crypto and all that right now, that I can actually tell you that there are no-code tools that actually allow you to build blockchain applications as well. So again, over here we have the so-called low-code, no-code landscape. It's a lot, right? As you can see here, there's a lot of these applications out there available for you. And we will go into how to pick these tools for yourself, right? But essentially, as you can see here, there is a tool for anything and everything that you can think of, any idea that you might have. So there are tools to build chatbots, for example, right? Chatbots that you can put onto your Facebook, your Instagram, your WhatsApp, right? And be able to automate this, right? In a sense that you are still able to communicate with your consumers and customers, even, you know, when you're asleep, for example. There are no-code tools to build CRMs, blockchain, for example. On top of that, typical e-commerce website builders, a very big one is Shopify, for example. So Shopify can also be considered a no-code tool because it allows you to very simply put up an e-commerce site in less than an hour, right? For example, you can even build games using no-code tools. And most importantly, we have over here is internal tooling, right? So a lot of these ideas or maybe startups that you can think of, maybe what you need is actually not a front-end facing application, right? Rather, you want to automate a lot of processes in your company, for example, especially existing startup founders right now. Maybe there are tools that you want to use and all this communication. So with no code and a few tools that can link all this together, you are able to present this information a lot better and also manage your organization a lot better. So again, you will need to have, with all that bombardment of tools I showed you just now, you will need to have a rough understanding about what each of these tools does, right? So the best part, again, all these tools, they are getting very competitive. There's a lot of these tools in the market. So when you visit their website, they'll be able to very quickly explain to you what the tool does, right? And the best part about this is that most of these tools are free, right? So you're free to go and experiment with them. In fact, I encourage you to go and experiment with these tools, pair them together. And the best way to learn about these tools is actually to build with it, right? So currently, there's also a curated list on my website. You can go check out codeless.my if you want to. There's a curated list of no-code tools that are very easy to use that you can kind of, at the same time, while you're in this workshop, you can kind of go and check it out, you know, see what the no-code tools are about. So with all these tools that you have mastered, essentially you need to put them into a toolbox, right? So nothing too far away in a sense that if there are technical people, I'm sure there are technical people in the audience right now. So no code and a typical developer, they all share the same idea, right? In a sense that to build something, you need your tech stack. To build a technical product, right? To build a tech product, you need a tech stack, right? Essentially what a tech stack is that it's your toolbox that have all these tools, right? So typically it's not that far, it's not that different. Over here, we have a very common stack in the developer right now called MERN stack. So essentially this stack will consist of everything, right? A developer will need. in the sense that they will use a database over here, a server over here, some frameworks to make up their app. And you, as a aspiring no-code developer, you need to be doing the same thing, right? So you would also have your no-code stack, right? Meaning that you would put up different tools that will make up that you have, like the best confidence in using it. You love using this tool. You'll make up this tech stack to build your front end. You will use this tech stack to build any kind of inputs and automation that you want. And you'll use this tech stack to also build your backend, right? And once you connect all of this together, that will make up your toolbox or tech stack, right? So you are not that far off away in terms of what developers typically use, right? It's the same concept, even with no code. So one of the questions that I always gotten, right, is that since we spend so much time building on these platforms and tools, what happens in a sense that, okay, like let's say this tool is not available for us anymore, right? So that is generally one of the main concerns of using no-code tools, right? So to address that, what we're trying to say is that actually all these tools are interchangeable, right? So don't get married with your tool, in a sense that once you understand what each tool does and what, in terms of the app life cycle that you will need, what kind of tool will get the job done, you'll be able to very quickly interchange this. So the best example here is, for example, Google Sheets, right? So Google Sheets has been used, for the longest time, and a lot of people actually use it as some form of database, right? So there's obviously other tools that maybe have come across, let's say like Airtable. Airtable is a very good alternative to Google Sheets, and maybe Trello, right? If your organization uses Trello. So all these tools can actually be interchanged to act as your database, any kind of front-end tools. And again, there's so many tools out there, right? So the advice here is that master your stack, right? Once you know what kind of developer you are, what kind of products that you like to build, and what kind of products that you can build even for your startup, you can start considering alternatives, right? Meaning that if there's a cheaper tool that can get the job done, you can very easily just replace it. And again, remember that tools do not make the developer. And in terms of what no code can actually really do for you as a non-technical person, is that it will teach you to how to think like a developer and start to look for alternatives as you progressively get more experience, right, by using all these platforms. So there's also a term in the market right now, maybe you guys have come across, no code and also low code, right? So we have talked about everything that has to do with no code. So let's talk a little bit about low code, right? So once you have scaled a product, once you've built a product that is good enough to be your MVP, right? And you want to think about adding more features that this particular platform would not allow you to be doing, right? You can use something called low code. And what low code means is that it is further development just by adding very, very minimal coding, right? And once you have gained that experience, you'll be able to understand that it's actually very simple. It's something what we call API, meaning that all these software development platforms, they actually have very in-depth documentation that will teach you how to add very simple lines of code, meaning that you don't even need to really type out all those code. You can just copy paste and just change it based on your scenario, right? Because again, your product can vary very differently to the product that the other person wants to build. So for the no-code platform, essentially, flexibility could be an issue, but it can be overcome by using low code. Sorry. So when you experiment with all these tools, it might actually even spark your interest to maybe, hopefully, actually even do some coding, right? And for developers out there in the audience, right? For no code, what it can actually benefit as us as a software developer is that it actually frees you from repeatedly writing low impact code, right? So meaning that you have to, right now you can spend less time going, like Stack Overflow to copy and paste, for example. So a lot of this part can actually be automated. And if you're a developer, I actually urge you to, kind of practice a little bit of a hybrid model. You don't have to code everything from the ground up. there are certain tools out there that will, cut down development lifecycle by a lot of time, and you can actually implement this and launch products even faster, right? And that pretty much concludes the theory part of things, right? Hopefully you guys can kind of get an idea of what no code is and what no code can do for you. So right now, we're going to do something a little bit more exciting, right? A little bit more interactive. It is building time. So today, I would like to form, a co-found a startup with you, and we're going to build a product from scratch, right? Based on, let me see how much time we have left. Let's say about 40 minutes, we are able to build a startup, for example. So today we will be building a job portal, or career platform if you want to be fancy about it, right? So typically when we start thinking about building a startup or product, these are the few questions that we would ask ourselves, right? So do we actually need a landing page, for example? Do we need a website? Or typically we can just use even like Facebook, Instagram to act as our web page. Do we need a web app or a native app? So typically a web app, especially a web app today, right? They are all mobile responsive. And I will actually urge you to always go for web applications first, because it is accessible anywhere and everywhere, and there's no need to download it, right? So downloading an application, even as of today, is quite the first step for your customers and consumers. So that is something that you probably want to think about, in the sense that no one really wants to download an application anymore, right? So, and this is something that you can ask yourself, when was the last time you actually downloaded an application, right? So using a web app ideally be better, because it can be accessed both on desktop and mobile. So we are definitely going for a web app option today. And what we can also think about is that what kind of database that we want to use. How many people will be managing the application or the product, right? So obviously you're not going to be working alone, right? Maybe you will have some help. You have people that are maybe even less technical and not technical savvy than you are. So the simplest way that we can do this is by just simply using Google Sheets, right? So anyone and everyone, rather in today, I will assume that they would know how to use Google Sheet, and they don't need to look into any kind of complex database. They can manage the application just by using Google Sheets, for example. And obviously, moving forward, we want to talk about what features do we want, what kind of tools that we should be putting together, and how much time does it actually will take to complete this product, right? So I hope you guys are excited. We are going to do a little bit in terms of talking about the actual tools and teaching you guys to build this. So I have a few skeleton built already. I'm not going to go very in-depth into each particular tool, but hopefully you'll be able to understand the concept of it, right? Before all that, obviously, for a startup, we are co-founding today, we want to name our startup, right? So welcome you guys to interact with me again. Over here, we have a QR code. We are starting a job portal today, right? So give me your best names, right? What should we name our startup, right? Give me your best name. I'll just put this, and I'll even show you how to generate a logo based on the name that we select, right? So if you guys want to interact with me, please go ahead, scan this QR code, and give me some suggestions as to what our startup should be called, our job portal startup should be called. All right. Jobless. Here's a good one. So we've got a few good suggestions coming in. So please send in your startup name suggestions. You can even leave it on the chat if you want to, if you don't want to scan this Slido. So I'm going to stop sharing for now. We're going to take a very, very quick pit stop to take a few questions that you guys might already have. And then right after that, we're going to jump immediately into co-founding a startup together, right? I'm going to stop sharing now. Please keep the names coming in. You can even drop it in the chat.